As you are surely aware, most maps we see don't depict a country's size particularly accurately. There are clearly many different techniques to project a map, and some are obviously more accurate than others, but those aren't always the most popular ones. The Merkle projection, which has been around for a while, is the most frequently used map style. Gerardus Mercator, a Flemish geographer, first proposed it, and because it enabled for the representation of ship lines of continuous course, its use for maritime navigation quickly became the norm. However, when latitude climbs from the equator to the poles, it distorts the size of objects. Basically, territory close to the equator is shown to be larger more properly than locations like Greenland or Antarctica, which are substantially distorted and seen to be much larger than they are. Currently, certain map projections are more precise and have more features. However, none of them are completely true since, as an excellent example that people often use to make their point, it is impossible to portray a sphere on a flat surface without altering its dimensions. If you try to flatten an orange's shell after peeling it, we assume it tears, making it impossible to depict the sphere in this video as a plane. We decided to look at a few countries in the world and contrast their actual sizes with those we typically assume they are based on how we see them on a map. To see the videos we will be posting later, subscribe to AWZ. Russia is still the largest country in the world, regardless of how it appears on a map. There are more than 17 million square kilometers, and those numbers remain the same. On standard maps, nevertheless, the comparison of its size to several other nations is far overly inflated. Don't get us wrong, though. Since Russia is so large, the United States, Finland, India, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark could all fit inside with plenty room to spare. However, if you relocate Russia's location on the globe to the equator, it loses around 2/3 of its display area and moves into the US's territory. On a typical map, we can see that there isn't much of a difference between the two countries' territories. At first glance, you would believe that 3 or 4 Americans could fit in Russia, but the truth is probably closer to 2. Greenland follows. The distortion that maps creates on a Mercator projection is most frequently illustrated with the case of Greenland. Greenland is actually much smaller than it appears to be, with just over 2 million square kilometers, and could fit 3 Australias inside. When 7.5 million people live in Australia, Greenland's size changes to be realistic and much smaller when it is positioned above Africa at the equator. Similar in size to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's interesting to note that if we were to position it over the South Pole, not only would its shape be altered, but it would also become larger. But it would also alter in shape. Relocating to Romania, for example, where there are the Carpathian Mountains, Dracula's Castle, salt mines, and many more things. A reasonably sizable nation in Europe, covering around 240.000 square kilometers. Let's examine how enormous it would appear if it were displayed farther north. If it were displayed farther north, we would believe it to be the size of Iran or something like, and if it were displayed between Somalia and India along the equator line, it would appear to be much, much smaller. California, with 423,000 square kilometers, is the 3rd largest state. But its size is also slightly skewed. It demonstrates how comparable in size they are when placed over the UK. Interestingly, a map's depiction of the size differences between US states is fairly realistic, because they are roughly at the same latitude. The same scale distortion occurs in their size. There are some noticeable changes. For instance, North Dakota appears larger than it is because it is located at a higher latitude in Texas. Although in contrast to other states, there isn't a significant difference. The form distortion created by maps is best illustrated by the US states, because many of them have borders that are straight lines. The previously described one, as you move North Dakota towards Canada, it begins to curve up, and the opposite occurs. When you shift it to South America and see a country like Ecuador's actual size, due to its proximity to the equator line, which means that the map display doesn't distort it. The name of the nation provides a small hint in that case. Yet if we spread it over the US, it would undoubtedly rank among the top 4 states in terms of size. Consequently, any country that is depicted on a map near the equator line will appear on the globe at a size that is closer to that country. However, as a country moves away from the equator line, its display will become increasingly distorted, both in size and shape. Additionally, this website is excellent for determining the types of countries that can fit inside of other countries. You might, for instance, fit France and Germany, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and the UK, Ukraine, Poland, Austria, and Turkey are still able to fit inside China. Referring to the UK dragging it over Finland makes them appear to be nearly the same size, however moving it over Congo only makes it somewhat larger. Indonesia would appear enormous if it were placed over Russia and stretched from Finland to China on top of that. Yeah, it would be longer than the distance between the east and west coastlines, but if you look at Congo and Finland, you would never think that traveling to Asia. It's crucial to realize that countries that appear to be large actually are large. What is incorrect is the size disparity between the countries perceived to be greater than it actually is due to comparisons between them. Brazil, which is unquestionably quite huge at 8 million square kilometers, appears considerably larger when it is placed on top of the US and even larger when it is placed on top of Russia. The size difference shown on a map isn't equal to or accurately depicts the actual size difference in square kilometers. When placed over the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the USA appears much, much smaller. The difference is also apparent if we simply shift the USA just a little bit south over Mexico. The reverse is also effective. Mexico appears much larger over the west and enormous over Canada in the north. Due to its proximity to the equator line, Australia, one of the world's largest countries at 7.6 million square kilometers, isn't shown substantially larger or smaller than it actually is. However, if you slide it over Europe, you can see how much bigger it is than essentially the entire continent. The key issue is that all countries on a map would need to be displayed along the same line for humans to accurately perceive this size comparison between them. When we try to turn a globe into a plane, their size is distorted since they are exhibited in their places. Next, let's try China, which, despite seeming considerably smaller on a map, is almost as big as Russia. Japan is just about 380,000 square kilometers in size, but if it were put over Canada, it would appear to be much larger. If you color code Europe in this area in green, you also receive a far larger size than reality in places like Antarctica, which, although seeming enormous on a map, is actually only slightly larger than Brazil. Nonetheless, moving it further north makes pretty much all of North America bigger. In our opinion, Antarctica is the best example of this. Despite not actually being so enormous, it appears to be absolutely enormous on its normal display. It's merely located at the South Pole, therefore it covers the entire map. Basically, maps are fantastic when you turn the world into a plane. However, it's important to keep in mind that occasionally objects depicted on it aren't as large as they appear to be. For example, if you're seeing a Mercator projection, the further away an object is from the equator, the more disproportionately large it appears to be. There are now map projections available that provide more accurate depictions than the Mercator projection. Some make some corrections to the benefit of others. But that is a subject for another video. You will just need to use a globe if you want an entirely accurate map.